Hi there, it's Tim, Golf 5 Tango Michael. Thanks for coming along. If you're an existing watcher and subscriber, then great to have you back again. And if you're new to the channel, then think about clicking that subscribe button and the notification bell. You're going to be told about any future videos of mine, any future releases. But either way, great to have you here. Now, in the past, I've used this particular antenna quite often. It's the inverted V dipole. Great for getting a dipole into a smaller space than if you had to run it as a flat top. And it performs basically almost equally as well. And when you read up about things to do with inverted Vs on the good old World Wide Web, you often get told that the apex angle shouldn't really be any less than 90 degrees. So what I want to do is have a look at the difference between running a flat top dipole, where the angles of course would be 180 degrees, with different angles of an inverted V, and even going down below 90 degrees as well, to see why it isn't a good idea, or maybe to make sure it isn't a good idea, to run those angles at anything less than 90 degrees. In terms of the dipole we're looking at today as an example, I'm looking at a 40 meter dipole. I'm going to put the feed point about 8 meters above the ground. So 25-30 feet is kind of the average sort of height, which is about 8 to 10 meters, I guess. So we're going to cover looking at the effect of these different angles on an inverted V by looking at it in two ways. We're going to cover gain, and we're going to cover SWR as well. So the first thing we're going to look at is a dipole that's basically a flat top with both legs at 180 degrees to each other. Okay, so let's have a look. On the right-hand diagram, we can see that most of the RF is going up at quite high angles. In fact, if we look at the writing underneath the right-hand diagram there, you can see that basically we've got gain at the very top there of 6.82 dBi, and that is coming off at 90 degrees. So the RF is basically shooting straight upwards. Okay, great antenna this for hops into Europe from the UK. In around the UK, we've got inter-G short skip propagation. This antenna will do really well. So from about a few hundred to a couple of thousand miles or kilometers, this antenna will be quite a strong antenna, putting out a decent performance when the conditions allow. Remember, we're looking at this in terms of gain and SWR. Let's check gain first of all and go back to a similar diagram. Now in this diagram, we're now comparing 180 degrees, again the flat top in black, and now we're bending the legs to be even more acute. So we're going from, look at the table at the bottom there, you've got black at the top, and then you've got red, which is 90, blue, which is 80, what do we call that colour? Browny green, I don't know, which is 70, pink, which is 60, and again, I'm colourblind, the bottom one, which is 45, so the purpley red thing, which is 45 degrees. Now, if you look at the diagrams themselves, especially the right-hand one, which looks at, the peak gain really, you can see there, look, that the, 180 degrees, there's a bit of a gap there, but when we look at the difference between 90 and 45 degrees, the gain isn't that much different. And if we go to the table at the bottom again, under that GA column, the gain column, effectively, two things happen. There is a slight reduction in gain. So between a flat top dipole, which gives us 6.8, down to dBi, down to 45 degree angles. That's really acute now, an acute angle between these two legs. We'll go down now to 5.6 dB. So effectively we're down just over a dB, but 1.2 dB. And the other thing that changes as well, looking back at the table, is that the angle of peak gain, if you like, just changes a little bit. So if you look at the LEV column, just two away from the GA column, the LEV column, again halfway through, which means elevation. Effectively, look, the flat top has its angle of peak gain at 90 degrees. And when we go down to the very bottom one, which is 45 degree angle between the two legs, we've only gone, it's reduced by about a degree to 88.9. So in terms of gain, right, between 180 to 45 or 90 to 45, whichever you want to look at it, there's hardly any difference at all in terms of the amount of gain that you get. There's a dB, which is nothing, and also the angle where we have peak gain. We go from 90 to 89 degrees. So we get a very similar antenna. So is there basically much to worry about here in terms of making these angles more acute than 90 degrees? Well, the answer is there is a bit more to worry about, because on the other side of the coin, we're looking at SWR, and we're looking at the SWR bandwidth and the degree to which we can get a decent tune with these antennas. Now, if we look at this, we can see that on this table on the right-hand side, we've got the dipole angle at 180 degrees going down to 45 degrees. And on the right-hand column, we've got the 2-to-1 SWR bandwidth. And what MMANA modeling software has informed me anyway, and I suspect this is true for the real world, is that the more we bend these legs into each other, the more sharply we create an SWR curve. And in fact, we get to a certain point where it becomes pretty much impossible to get a decent SWR with the antenna. If we look back at the table again, we can see as we go from 180 degrees in yellow, we've got a good bandwidth, a 270 kilohertz bandwidth on 40 meters at 2-to-1 or better. And then at 90 degrees, we just lose about 33 kilohertz off that. So still, even at 90 degrees, we get a good tune. And of course, the other thing that happens at night, when we bend our legs down, which is one thing I haven't mentioned, we go from flat top to a more acute angle. We lower the feed point impedance, so we tend to get a better SWR anyway at the best tune. We go from something like 1.3 down to basically 1.1 or 1-to-1. When we go down to an inverted V. However, when we go narrower than 90 degrees, we begin to reverse that process. Going back to the table then, if we lose it down to 80 degree angle, okay, 185 kilohertz, we can probably work solely as a voice operator there. Within Europe, we get basically almost the whole band in anyway for that. And in the US, you'll get 2/3 of your band in, so not desperate. But then if we go to 70 degrees and we're making this angle even more acute, then we're actually then creating a far reduced bandwidth, just under 100 kilohertz. And that's a bit more like a shortened dipole. You know, if you've got a really short dipole with loading coils in it, you'll get a much reduced bandwidth. It's kind of like that, really. But the other thing to bear in mind is when we then make it even more acute and go to 60 and 45 degrees, we don't even get down to a 2-to-1 SWR anywhere. We basically the 2-to-1 bandwidth as a possibility disappears once you get down to 60 degrees. The other thing to bear in mind here is then looking at what sort of SWR we get in the first place. What's our best tune? Well, if we look at some of these figures here taken directly from MMANA, first of all, we look at the 80 degree angle. At 80 degrees, we get a slightly higher minimum SWR than we would at 90 degrees, but we get a tune at around 1.55 to 1. It's not disastrous. By the way, ignore the frequencies running at the bottom of the graph. You can apply this where you shift it up or down. It gives you the same sort of bandwidth and the same sort of figures anyway. We then look at 70 degrees. At 70 degrees, we now find that we don't get a much better tune at all. We're sort of getting around 1.8, 1.9 to 1 at best. And of course, don't forget our 2-to-1 bandwidth is far less. And when we get to 60 degree angle, which is in the legs, then basically we can't get much of a tune at all, really. About 2.3 to 1 at best. We don't then get an SWR bandwidth at all under 2-to-1, so that's really a problem as well. And then finally at 45 degrees, look, then and the game is up. We're not getting much of a tune at all. So effectively, therefore, whilst in terms of gain, theoretically we don't lose a great deal, what we do lose is the ability to actually create a tunable monoband dipole. Okay, we can get away with going to 80, maybe even 70 degrees in terms of that gap. Probably not advisable to go much below that, because at the end of the day, we then lose the ability to actually have a tunable antenna. Of course, the other payback to that is as well, if you've got a 2.5 to 1 SWR at best, you're then going to have some feed line loss, and even down in 7 megahertz, and even with a run of say 50 feet of RG58, you will lose a little bit more. That's another thing to bear in mind as well. Well, thanks for watching. There's another video coming up here, and do click subscribe as well if you want to. That's there as well. It'd be lovely to have you on board. Take care, and enjoy your radio too. All the best. Bye-bye.